tell us your name?
Laura Matau.
And Laura, when and where were you born?
I was born in Charleston, South Carolina.
How did you come to live in Austin?
My dad was in the military and we traveled, and when he chose to retire, he picked Austin.
Will you retell us about the home ec visit by the fire department?
So when I was in junior high at Webb, they had the firefighters come out to teach us fire safety in the kitchen. And I was sitting in class and I'm listening to their song and dance about fire safety, and I said, how many women are in the department? And they just looked at each other and they go, there are no women in the fire department. They cannot be firefighters, they can't. And I remember thinking, that just didn't sound right. But back in that day and time, I remember telling my dad I was going to join the military, and he said, I'll disown you. Why would you disown me if I'm going to join the military? And he says, no daughter of mine's good. You know, it was.
So when you were in high school, what did you think you want to do?
Well, I was kind of angry in high school because I thought I was going to have to grow up, get married, and have kids, and that really, I was kind of angry about that. I really didn't have a plan. And the fire department, they said they will pay you while you go through training. So when I started training, I had 2 children. And I really didn't have any way to really stand on my own 2 feet. And I was going through a divorce. So I said, you're going to pay me to learn, 5 months of training, and the hours are 24 on, 48 off. I'm like, where do I sign up? How do I get it? How do I do this? This sounds great. And so I put in my application, and it was a very long process, background investigation, just a lot of hoops to jump through. And my class started in November the 7th of 1977. I joined, and then had in training, had a couple of stories, but I made it through training. Then I was on probation for 6 months, and I was assigned to 5th and Trinity Central Station. And they have a pole that you slide down. They were just an interesting crew. There were 2 engines and a truck that were assigned there, so there were a lot of people. And Alex Trevino was a character there. And I was mopping the floor because we had 2 cleanups because there were so many people. And the Boy Scouts were coming through for a tour. And they go, there are women in the department? And Alex says, no, we just have her to clean the floors. There was a lot of razzing too that you had to endure. But they say if they liked you, they razzed you. Although there were different levels of razzing. So Central Station was good. The first few fires I went on, my lieutenant was Charlie Knobloch. And he would put me with another crew that was standing by, and he would take off. And I'm like, he did that twice, and he's my lieutenant, and I'm like, okay, Charlie, why you keep doing that? Because he didn't know what to do with me. He did not know what to do with me. So then finally, I'm going with him. And they all tested me. Can I? One guy wanted to know, could I carry him out of a fire? And I said, I'll drag you out. And I had him lay down and I drug him. I drug him to the stairs. And I said, let me know when you want me to stop, because I was going to do it the hard way just for fun. And they had a right to wonder, because we had a female join our department, and she was small in stature. And I'm like, how could she do it? Because I know what it takes to do this. And she could do it. I watched her do it. She was pound for pound, probably stronger than me, even though she was little. And then it dawned on me the perception of the men. They thought they had to be so strong, so how could a female do that? And it helped me to understand them a little more. Their pride was, there could be a stretcher, and I certainly could lift my end, but they wanted to do it for the macho reason. And so I had to learn when to assert and when not to. And that was interesting. I learned a lot about men, working with men. I did. If you didn't clean your state in the morning, you had to have your bed made by a certain time, and if not, they would throw it down the pole hole because the maid didn't come in time. They would have water fights at the station. Good camaraderie. And I stayed wet a lot. We had a lot of water fights, but the thing is, once you got wet, everyone was wet. They talked me into throwing a pot of water on my lieutenant, on a lieutenant, Don Smith, and they all goaded me into it. But I had a plan. I was going to run upstairs and lock myself in a room. And so I threw it on him, and I'm running up the stairs at Central, and the guys are blocking my way. Sorry, Laura. And then I realized they have set me up, and I got hosed for that one. But they always stuck together pretty well. And they said, if you do something to someone, never admit it. But they would always rat on me, and I'm like, wait a minute. That's not how you said it worked. So times have changed, and the people that went before me and finally got people to see that, yes, women can be firefighters. Can all women be firefighters? No. But can all men be firefighters? No. It's a job that is particular has a certain set of skills, but they allowed us the opportunity, and we did everything that the men did, everything. And then they threw in a few extra things just for fun for us women. But I understood that because I was going into a male-dominated career, and I knew that they would not be happy about it. But most of the men in the department were great. There's always a handful, and probably in any profession.
When I looked you up, I saw an article about your first night there and realizing what your sleepwear was going to be. Are you willing to share that story?
So the men slept in their underwear. I slept in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. And I remember my training officer, Chief Wimberly, he asked me, and just what are you going to wear? I'm going to wear a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I really didn't think that far ahead what the men would or would not wear. And we slept in a dorm. And apparently a lot of the guys moved to their location once I chose my bed, which I didn't know because I didn't know where they were before. And they also could rig the bed so that when you touched it, it collapsed. But seeing guys in their underwear was not a big deal.
A clarifying question, how old were your children when you were in the academy?
Let's see, I joined in 77 and my son was born in 71. And Jenny was born in 74, so she was 3. And Jeff was 6. When I was in training, my babysitter broke her foot. My son was getting out of school. She called the training academy and told them, and I called my parents and they weren't available. Nobody was available. And I didn't have a car going through training because it broke down. I was like starving Marvin back in the day. So Chief Wimberly put me in the training van and we went to my house. And there was my son, my 6-year-old son, who had walked home from school, and he had been home, no one was home, and he was just walking away when we pulled up. Even though I had told him, stay. And then Chief Wimberly put my son in the training van, and we went back to training. And he watched my son while I finished training. Now that Chief Wimberly took a big ribbing about that. What are we running here, a daycare? And I really appreciated him doing that. That was phenomenal in that day and time. So that was interesting.
When your kids were young, how did they experience you as a firefighter? I don't think they understood, because to them, they didn't understand that was something special or new. They just assumed women were firefighters. So I don't think they thought much about it. It was difficult finding childcare because people don't want other people's children in their home at night. So I found that was the hardest part, was finding good childcare. Is this an article about a day in the office with Mom? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So This was in 1995. Callie was 10. And on my off-duty day, I went in and they had a hose out, they had a firefighter drag out, they had all the tools out for the children to touch and feel the jaws of life. And so she wanted to do the hose, and they got a photo of us doing that, and the next day it was in the newspaper. So we were impressed. Her school was impressed and made a big to-do about it. So yeah, that was, for her, that was pretty good. For the other two, there was no article for the other kids, and they came to see me at the station, from time to time.
What about your grandchildren? It looks like there's another article about you as the only firefighting grandmother.
So I became a grandmother at 34, and I have to tell you, the guys wrote down my age, my son's age in the article. He was 19, so they, I was a young mother. I was pregnant at 15, and I did drop out of school, but I got my GED. And then I got married when I was 18, and then I had my daughter, Jenny. And about 4th year into marriage, I knew this was not going to work, and I looked for a way to stand on my own 2 feet. And I happened to be strong for a woman, unusually strong for a woman. I've always been that way. I was just born that way, nothing I did. And so the fire department was a great fit for me. I did consider being a police officer, but I just envisioned somebody knocking me out with their fist, and that was like, no, that's not me. Because I'm a lover, not a fighter. I like helping people, and this job, being a firefighter, allows that. You're there at people's worst time, and you're there and you can make a difference. And it was a great, great feeling. I feel privileged that I was a firefighter. I've had a lot of people go, but they really let you fight fire? They would, they let you? Yeah, they let me. Sometimes I got to do the dirtiest jobs because it just depended who was in charge and what was. But in the beginning, it was new to everyone. Women were slow to come in the department. I have some funny times that I don't know that y'all would appreciate them all, but I got hung on a truck room door one time at Station 25. It took all the guys to put my belt loop on the thing, and then the captain hit the up button. And I just kind of hung there because I was entertainment for them. I didn't want to be too much entertainment. And then they finally let me down, but they let me know that they put the rookie on it first to make sure it would hold. And at Central Station, I was left behind on a call, but I jumped on the other engine, which that was a goal to try and leave you if you weren't quick enough. And the lieutenant and the driver happened to be downstairs when the call came in, so they just hopped in and hooked them. And I was hitting the floor from the pole as they were pulling out, and so I just jumped on 130. And when we got back to the station, it turned out not to be anything. So when we got back, I challenged the man that was our driver. His name was Charlie Bryant, and they also called him Daddy-O. That was his nickname. And I said, why'd you leave him? He goes, well, what good are you anyway? I looked at him. Now, he joined the department the year I was born, just to give you some perspective. And I said, I dare say I'm as good as you, is what I said. And he put me in a headlock. And I'm looking at all the guys, and I'm in a headlock. And I'm like, okay, now what? I'm like, what are my options now? And he didn't know what to do with me either. And he let me go. But after that day, after that moment, he treated me with respect and stood up for me from that day forward. So it was like a turning point. And there were, guys who were, would hit on me, and I just had to come up with some cute, great way just to get out of it. Sense of humor helped a lot. We made calls. This is Boggy Creek. And I was at Station 7. That's Lieutenant Harry Pace. He has since passed on. And there were people in their houses who didn't really want to vacate. And I mean, water was just below some of the electrical outlets. But some of the families did want to leave, and we loaded them up and took them to safety. And that was just a great feeling. So I've had a good career. I used to keep a journal, and I wrote about a fire, IBM fire. And I went into detail, and I posted it on Facebook. And I tried to get the firefighters to share their history, their stories, because when you get a bunch of them together, it's hilarious. The stories that they tell and the backstories that they tell. And one story will lead to another story. No, do you remember the time? But so I did write up the story on IBM fire. I can send it to you if you're interested. And they wanted me to write some more up, but I always thought I'd do it one day. But one day is, well, I'm 68, so I'm not sure when one day will be.
You want to tell us about a few big fires or rescues?
Well, some of the big fires involve multiple companies. So the IBM fire, I was at Station 23 on Rumberg Lane, and the call came in as a grass fire. So I believe Station 8 was the first one. They're on Burnett Road and 183. They were the first there, and they upgraded it pretty quick. And I was still kind of new, and I asked the guys, I'm getting interested. We're going to go to a fire. And they don't want to go because they know it's work. There's a lot of work. But we got moved up to Station 8 to stand by and support that area. But before we could even, get into the station, I'm asking the guys, well, can we just drive by and look at it? I want to see this big fire. And they're like, no. So we're starting to pull into the driveway of Station 8, and we're told to go to the fire. The guys are not thrilled. It's very cold outside. I'm riding on the tailboard of the engine. That part was pretty cold. And on the way there, we put out 2 fires that had started from the embers floating and landing. But when we got there, it was just like a TV movie set, fully involved structure, 2-story, and just about the time we're going here, it's collapsing. I mean, this is a 5-alarm fire. But the only hydrant is on Kramer and Burnett Road, 1 hydrant. And it's not enough flow, because back in the day, when they were building, today, if you're gonna build, you have to have the hydrants ready, and you have to have a drive that will support the heavy equipment or apparatus. But back then they didn't. It wasn't done. So we were the hose was laid from Kramer in, and it flows 1,200 gallons a minute, and we didn't have enough water to supply it. We didn't have that much. And so we had hand lines, and we were told to go on this bridge and put the fire out that we could have access to, but the whole IBM was on fire. It was like a moat around it, and the building and the concrete was still wet, and the creosote that they used to contain and do the forms, that accelerated the fire. There was high wind. It just went from one end to the other. It was not looking good, and it was really cold. And one chief argued with another chief about hop on, hop off the bridge. And finally, the chief that was trying to protect us won, and we didn't have to be on the bridge. And I was there for the whole night. It was cold, so very cold. And when you get wet and cold, there's nothing like wet and cold. When we were on break, we went to the command center, and they invited me in, and I'm looking at all these chiefs, and they're like, you want to stay? And I'm like, no. My men are, they're out there. I'm going back. But we worked the whole night. The hose was laying in mud. It was caked in mud. And at the end of the night, we had to roll that up, take it back to the station. We had to clean it, get the mud off of it. We had to reload the new hose on before we cleaned. It was just work. And the guys asked me, Laura, are you glad we went now? Well, I kind of still was, because it was a new experience to me. I was young, and but there was a lot of work, and it was very cold. I had a heating blanket on my bed at the station because the guys liked it really cold at night. And when I finally got my shower, I was the last one to shower, crawl in bed at like 5 in the morning. There was a guy in my bed, and I'm like, Lawrence, get out of my bed. He says, I just wanted the warmth. And everyone was done with the cold, but anyway, so that was the funny end to that story.
What were some of the other stations that you were posted at?
My first station was downtown Central Station, then I went to Station 7. And then after that, I went to Station 25. And I was at the airport for a while before Station 30 was built. So I got to learn the runways and all that in and out there. And I was also assigned to public education for 3 years, which I learned a lot. I learned so much about prevention and teaching children and how they learn. I did some recruitment with Ray Coleman, and I did a little bit of operations and research with Billy Webb and Ken Placid and Frank German, because they created this thing called a smoke buster, which was, they used a propeller from an airplane and made a huge big fan, and then they converted AFFF foam to put fires out. But also they did a study. We used to use negative pressure to pull smoke out of a building, and they learned that positive pressure was quicker and faster. And Billy Webb was on the cutting edge of that, so that was kind of cool.
Did you get to work with other women firefighters?
Rarely. Sometimes I got to work with Becky at Sevens. She was on a trade, or I was on a trade. She was on another shift. And they asked for lifting assistance, and so we laughed all the way over there because they were expecting, some big burly guy to get off the apparatus and come help. Of course, we did all the lifting they needed, but it was still funny to us because we knew what they were expecting when we showed up. And we had people shake their head when they, would see me, like, what will they think of next? And other people would go right on, So their spectrum was there for positive and negative. I had a guy at Central Station. He wouldn't sleep in the dorm once I got there. He slept downstairs. He was pretty miserable, and he slept in his uniform. And after about 6 shifts, they shipped him to another station, Station 10. And then when I went to Station 10, because they were short one day, they said, Laura, travel to 10s. I went to 10s, and he took off sick, so they never sent me again to that station because it made them doubly short. There were wives that were very upset. You just have to think back to that day and time and put, it was just different.
How, if you were able, did you connect to the other women firefighters in the earlier years?
Becky Brooks, we kind of got together like an association. I belonged to the union, but one female was speaking for the rest of us, and she said she didn't think that was right. She wanted a consensus of minds to come together. So Becky Brooks really initiated that. We would get together at her house or somebody's house, and we would just kind of, what do you think? Because issues about clothing, the clothing when I came in the department were men's pants, men's shirt, men's shoes, men's boots. The gloves were pitiful for anybody. They were rubber and they would melt, and our turnouts were thin, and they did have a liner, but most of them took their liner out because it was so hot. But it was almost like canvas. It was black helmet. The helmet was very thin. It took years before the department, and probably through the union, helped us to get better equipment and made the public aware that we do more than play checkers. When women came in the department, we encouraged each and every one, but we were like on our own at the station on the 3 shifts. We worked a 56-hour work week. My pay was
$875 when I started, and I brought home $500. My rent was $275, so I was like poor. So I got a second job as a janitor, which I could take my children with me, and I did that 13 hours a week. And I was not getting child support, and it was a struggle in my beginning years just for transportation, child care. I know I'm all over the board, but just like what part. So I had a great 26-year career. Most of the men were marvelous, really good, supportive men, and there's always a handful. We had to promote ourselves. What do firefighters do? So the car wrecks, the medical runs, I probably made more medical runs in my career but you know, the car wrecks / medical, and the houses burning, apartments burning. You know, I've made some big fires, and there were always work, and there were always a challenge, because when you're making a big fire, there was extra fires created by the one fire, but we would go in and put the fire out, and it was kind of interesting to do that. I don't mind going into a burning building, especially having the hose. You always can follow it back out, but some of the stuff you see from other humans, or one restaurant we went to, they had torched it and it was supposed to burn, but what happened is there was too much fuel. They turned on the gas stove and it just ignited, and then it put itself out. But the gas was still blowing, and when we opened the door, it could have set off we could have died right then, but you know, didn't. And we had our air mask on, so it took us a while to realize the jets were going full blast in the kitchen. It wasn't just an accidental fire. We made a telephone pole. This guy had a medical emergency, hit the pole, it snapped in half, but there was another pole kind of holding it up, and it was going across Lamar. And we were trying to help the guy, and this truck was coming down the road, and we didn't think much about it because the wires all looked okay, but the wire going across Lamar had come down enough. We didn't recognize it, and this truck caught it. And it cut through the truck, but as it's cutting through the truck, it's pulling the power lines down to us. And I really thought that day I was not gonna walk away. And the police and other firefighters were able to stop the truck just before, you know, half of it, the bottom part did, but the electrical part just kind of boinged back up at the last minute. So there were some times in my career when I came close, but again, it was, if you have a sensible head, they say, I always put my lieutenant in front. You go, I'm right behind you. And I had a lieutenant, I was in front somehow at a fire, and I pulled him around because I'm like, how hot are we supposed to? And as soon as he felt the heat, he said, back out, back out, back out. Because we didn't have Nomex hoods in the beginning. Our ears would get kind of warm, and you're like, okay, how warm?
Are there any other stories you've thought about since we scheduled this that you thought you might want to tell?
There are so many stories. And I've worked with some really good people. And I remember feeling bad when they would take my photo, because the men were like, we're firefighters, we do cool stuff, we're not in the paper, you know. Their feelings were hurt, and we used to have to buy ice cream if we got put in the paper, or if they videoed us. And so we tried to avoid the cameras, because who could afford ice cream? The department really is a good camaraderie. The guys would go hunting and fishing together. I didn't, because I just wanted them to invite me once on one of their fishing trips, but they said their wives wouldn't allow it. But I understood that too. So some of the camaraderie that they had, I could never really have with them. But I had a lot to do between working and then being a janitor and then the kids. It was a full-time job. But I'm happy. I've led a good life, and I've been retired 20 years now. And it wasn't easy, and I wasn't perfect. My life was not perfect, and my children's lives were not perfect.
Sounds pretty human and regular in that way. After you retired, did you do anything else for work, or did you just get to enjoy retirement?
Well, my well went out in 2012. So I retired in 2003. My well went out, and you're like, what's a well? It was $30,000 for that well. Everyone says a well is free. It is not free. Just want you to know it's not free. So I got a job working as a school bus driver in Georgetown, and I got to drive a school bus, and then they had me drive the disabled school buses for the wheelchair and the handicap. They wanted me because of my EMT. I actually was an EMT still then. I just let it go recently. So I learned a lot about wheelchairs and how you strap them into a bus, and what the parents go through and what the children. So again, it was another learning for me. But I did that for 3 years until I could recoup my well. But otherwise, I've been retired.
So speaking of, it looks like you have a partner who is a firefighter also.
Yes, we went through training together, and he wouldn't talk to me in training. I don't know if his photo's there. Yep. Larry Amstead. And we went through training. And I was married, he was married, and of course I was going through divorce. And we graduated. He went to Station 18, and I didn't really see him for most of the career. And towards the end of our career, he asked me out, and we went out. And he's the one that talked me into retiring. He said, "You're born here, you die here. When do you want to start having fun?" Well, my children were raised and gone, and I'm like, yesterday, I'm ready, let's go. And so we did. We got together. We're not married. We're never getting married. He has his own house. I have my house. We spend a lot of time together, and he's my forever fiance because he thought he's too old to be called a boyfriend. He'll love that.
What are some of the activities you do together?
So he likes to camp, and we like to fish. We both like to fish. I'm not big on camping. I like air conditioning and porcelain, but he loves to camp, and he has the cast iron skillets, and he likes to do the outdoor cooking. He was born in the wrong century is what it was. And he's a carpenter. He worked as a firefighter and a carpenter. Most all the firefighters had a second job. Some were electricians or plumbers, but he's really good with wood. But we were dancing and fishing and camping. The first 5 years just flew by. We were having so much fun. And then I raised my grandson, Case, the youngest one from my son, till he was 18, and now he's living in Bryan. But there for a while, we went to Alaska together, and we still have a few things on our bucket list, but I feel like I've had a magical life, a really good life. Hard, but good. I don't know if that's understandable.
What kind of dancing do you do?
Country dancing, rock and roll. Used to go to Mother Earth back in the day when it was on Lamar and 12th. I was a little young to go, but back then you could say you were married and just get in. I didn't go to drink or anything, but I did want to dance. And I had older siblings and friends, so I was just tagging along. So dancing was a lot of fun. I played softball, anything athletic, biking. I just preferred to be outdoors and go to the lake and hang out. I scuba dive.
Anything else before you?
Gee, so many people really did help me along the way.
Do you want to tell us a couple people that were good mentors?
Well, Lieutenant Smith, my engine broke in a car, and he put one in for me. I paid for the engine, but he used his labor for free, again, helping out. My cousin that babysat for me, the one that broke her foot that day. My parents, in a push when I couldn't find childcare. My mother was not the babysitting kind. She definitely was not, but she would be there if I needed her.
What are your parents' names?
Betty May Matau and Alexander Matau. No middle name because they didn't give it to them.
Do you have any siblings?
I have 2 sisters and a brother.
Who were your grandparents?
This is Grandpa Karavich, and that is Grandma Karavich right there. And on my dad's side, they had already passed. And I really don't have a good photo of his mom and dad. That photos were rare back then. So this is Grandpa Zanov Matau. I don't know if that's my dad's father from Romania. My father was first generation American. Well, the cool thing about Grandma and Grandpa Matau is that she came to America through Ellis Island, and her husband and her lived here for 6 weeks in Gary, Indiana, and he died of appendicitis. And they had left their 4 children behind in Romania. So she married my father's dad, Zanov Matau, and they had 4 more children. Well, they had 5, but 1 passed away from pneumonia. Anyway, and they opened up a grocery store, and he started building houses to rent out, and then Depression came and they lost everything. My dad was in the CC camp, and then he joined the military. He joined the Army because Air Force didn't exist. Then he joined the Air Force, became a flight engineer, and served for 27 years in total and retired here. So his first language was Romanian, and he used to really prank my friends on the phone when they would call. He would answer it in Romanian and they would hang up. He was quite the jokester. So that's them. And then Grandma and Grandpa Karavich there in Gary, Indiana. She worked in the steel mill and he did odd jobs. I'm really not sure what he did. We only saw them maybe 4 times in our life because of the moving and affordability to visit.
Do you know how far back you can trace your family's genealogy?
On my mother's side, there was a genealogist, and she went all the way back to the Mayflower on my mother's side. On my father's side, no. We go to Transylvania, Romania. And then not much is known.
Do you have any grandchildren?
My son has had 4 children, and both my daughters have had 3. And from my son's children, I have great-grandchildren. So,
where in Austin did you live with your family?
At 8817 Laverty Place off of Rumberg Lane. It was not quite an acre, but my mother fell in love with it. The house had no air conditioning, no heating. We had gas heaters. The closets were, if you went to them today, they're very small. But the rafters in the ceiling in the living room were wood like this. And my mom loved it. And there were pecan trees all around it. We lived by a creek, which flooded. But it was nice. I went to T.A. Brown. I think they tore that down or renamed it. T.A. Brown Elementary School on Anderson Lane. And then I went to Webb Junior High. And then I went to Lanier High School.
Do you have some stories you'd like to share about your childhood, adolescence, or
I had a great childhood. My mother she allowed me to play football, or we all did the same chores at the house. My brother had to wash dishes, we had to mow the yard, we all interchanged. So my mother was ahead of her time in that respect, and I was a tomboy. And I enjoyed being outdoors more than indoors. One time my sister, they loved to read, and I was always outside, but my mother made them go outside and made me come in and read one summer, and we all were angry with her. And I sat down and I finished that book like as fast as I could and done, and then back outside. And the sisters, they were caught outside for, a good long time. But Mom was trying to make them well-rounded, I guess. Dad worked at the post office after he retired, and he worked the PM shift. So I didn't see a whole lot of him after we moved here. When I was at school, he was home, and then when I got home, he was at work. So it was not the best. And my mom and dad, my dad was raised Catholic, and when he married my mom, who wasn't Catholic, that was a big deal. And he didn't marry another Romanian. That was a big deal back in the day. But no, he didn't want his wife to work. He was pretty adamant about that. His wife wasn't going to work. So really, people don't understand how much things have changed. So that the doors have been opened. Whether you go through them or not is your choice, but at least the door is open. So I'm appreciative that I had that opportunity.
Was your family involved in any neighborhood community groups or activities?
My mom did the CB radio for the police department. And I don't think my dad did do anything besides work. He just worked and worked. But I remember Mom doing the CB radio. She was always rescuing animals, all kinds of animals, and feeding them. 16 possums she fed on an eyedropper. And invited the neighborhood kids to see them and hold them, touch them, learn about them. So I know a lot about animals because of my mom.
Is there anything in particular you'd like visitors or new residents to Austin to know about the history of Austin that you experienced?
Austin was just a jewel. When in '65, my brother and sister would go to Barton Springs, my older brother and sister. Mother would make them drag us along. And Barton Springs was just gorgeous. Wasn't crowded. Traffic on the freeway wasn't crowded. It's kind of hard to go back. I mean, at North Lamar and 183 or Anderson Lane, whatever they want to call it, there weren't even lights. I mean, it was a small town. It was wonderful. We could go anywhere. I could ride the bus downtown and with my sister, and we could go up and down Congress. It was safe, and we felt safe anyway.
Do you know where your family that was from Austin are buried?
My mom and dad are both buried in the military cemetery at Cook Walden there off of the freeway. I know they have different names so they're both buried there. And the other relatives are in Indiana.
Does your family have any unique ways of remembering your ancestors? Something unique to your culture?
Just the storytelling. My dad would tell us stories. His mother in Romania, she was a child, but she was a maid for people, upper class people. And my grandfather was actually a shepherd as a boy. That's what he did. And he would tell stories about Romania that he had heard, but then as an adult he went to Romania and met his half-brother and half-sisters, and they really had a terrible life. My Uncle Trayon lived in one room, and in that room was everything: the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room. And the hall, at the end of it, was the bathroom. Everyone used that bathroom, but there was no shower, no bath. You had to have money to go down to have bath at the bathhouse. There was a shortage of meat and toilet paper. And if my dad sent money to them, the government would take 25%. My dad tried sending them blue jeans because that was a black market item, but then they were intercepted in the mail and never got to the uncle. But Dad did try, and he did send them money trying to help them.
So you live in Georgetown?
I now live in Georgetown, yeah. I moved there in '85.
Women's history is very undertold. We just know things are hard and we keep going. And sometimes it's really inspiring to hear some of the things you had to endure so that some of the rest of us could just have, quote, normal experiences on the job. And I personally want to tell you thank you for getting through all that.
You're welcome. I was on an oral board one time, and we were trying to, this guy, he says, so if somebody says they don't like women, would you still allow them to be in the department? And I remember Becky and I were like, well, yeah, he's entitled to his opinion. The guy was less like floored that we would say yes, but we're like, well, it's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion, and you'll just have to live with the fact that we're here.
There were attitudes. I hope we changed them. A lot of men said that I changed the attitude that they had by watching me do the job. And some of them thought I did the job better than some men because I had heart and some of the men did not. And I would go the extra mile where men would not. So
We really, really appreciate you sharing your time and your history with us.
I hope it helps somebody down the road. I hope it is preserved. I hope people are interested.